Never Mind the Buzzwords is a community event from Jigsaw Better Business. Taking place bi-monthly, its aim is to build a community of businesses and professionals where you can learn, share and connect. It's about going beyond the jargon and coming away from each session with knowledge, tangible tools, tips, strategies, and hopefully an extended network. Each event is focused either on in the process sessions, we talk about how we deliver value in our business. Topics here include lean tools and thinking, operational excellence, sustainability, and digital transformation. In the people sessions, we look beyond the process to the who, discussing topics like leadership, teams, culture, and professional development. Never Mind the Buzzwords isn't just an event that you attend, it's an event to participate in. So get involved in the conversation, put your camera on if you can, share your thoughts, ideas or questions in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself. And don't forget to stay in touch. We have a LinkedIn group where we upload resources and recordings from this community. And if you follow Never Mind the Buzzwords on Eventbrite, you'll be notified whenever we post a new event.
Okay, good morning, everyone. You're all very welcome to this Never Mind the Buzzwords session. My name is Julie O'Sullivan. I am the Head of People Development with Jigsaw Better Business. And I am just going to hopefully spotlight myself, and I will add Stuart in as well. So the two of us are co-hosting today. We usually have a people side of it and a process side of it. So I usually would do the people ones, Stuart does the process. But today we are kind of combining the two. So it's all about, creating a lean culture. Stuart, do you want to maybe just say hello and kind of introduce yourself there?
Yeah, top of the morning, everyone. As Julie said, I'm Stuart. I'm co-hosting the event this morning, which is a crossover between the people and the process. So I primarily work in the process side of things with Jigsaw. So it's great to have everyone on the call this morning. Yeah,
absolutely. So as the video mentioned, feel free to jump in with any questions or comments, either using the chat, or you feel free to unmute yourself. You can pop your camera on if you feel comfortable doing so. And just to remind you that we're recording the session, so if you're sharing anything, just bearing that in mind, that we'll be sending the recording out afterwards. So today it is all about the lean culture, and how we can, understand it and measure it and manage it. Do you want to take it away, Stuart, there for a minute?
Yeah, so lean, as I said, lean culture, typically when we talk about it within our organizations, we talk about it in terms of all of the tools. So it's the tip of the iceberg that's present. So it's tools like 5S and chords. We analyze bottlenecks. We focus on flow. We've Kaizen improvement events. There's a big push on pull activities as well. So a lot of a focus on the tools and the techniques and the practices that we do as part of lean. And that's really, really good stuff, and really, really essential at freeing up ourselves as leaders and managers within an organization, but also in terms of our team, to free them up from work that's not value adding and focus on higher value adding work. What's unseen, though, is the other 9/10 of the iceberg that sits below it. And it's that strategic alignment between the organizational vision and what it needs to achieve alongside what the customer expectations are as well. So that strategic alignment between the tools and practices and what we want to achieve within the organization. What's also unseen, because it's not something that's focused on, and it can be good and bad, is the quality of the leadership within the organization. So that leadership, whether it's good or bad, is it servant, is it transformation, is it authentic, and how does that impact the success of a lean organization? Because it really is the starting point in driving a lean culture. And the other thing below the iceberg then, as well, the tip of the iceberg, is the behavior of the organization and the engagement of the people. So how does the organization behave? How do the people within the organization behave as teams, and how does that map through to the culture? And those behaviors really sit across 4 categories. So we kind of mentioned them already. So there's the leadership behavior, there's the team behavior, how the individuals behave within the teams and the organization, and how the organization behaves as an entity, as directed by the leadership team. And they're the 4 aspects of behavior that we would look to measure when we start to talk about a lean culture. So on the next slide, then we're going to see, this first step in this lean culture assessment. It's this measurement piece. So in Japanese, or in lean speak, it's Kijan, which stands for measurement. And what we want to do is we want to measure leadership behavior. We want to measure individual behavior. We want to measure how the teams behave or interact with one another, and how the organization behaves. And the first step to getting somewhere or to achieving something is to know where we are. And that's why assessment here really is key. And we can have quantitative and qualitative assessment of our tools and practices, but we can also do that in terms of measuring a lean culture. And we can do that through these behavior pillars that are up on the screen here. And really we can start to assess it and to measure it through psychometric testing. I might just get a show of hands in the Zoom here of people, how many people are actually using psychometric testing already within the business. Maybe just a thumbs up in your chat or reaction for anyone who's using psychometric testing. Many people will use it for teamwork or for personality assessments, for recruitment. But a lot of businesses don't use it necessarily in terms of measuring culture, in terms of linking it to operational excellence. So a couple of people are using it, psychometric testing already within the organization. So that's great to see. So when organizations are using psychometric tests already, it usually means that their people and their organizations are more open to using more of it as well. So that's kind of great to see. So in particular, the psychometric tests we're concerned with when we talk about a lean culture refer to authentic and transformational leadership first and foremost. Okay. So within authentic and transformational leadership, we're concerned with the different types of behaviors that a leader needs to exhibit that promotes and encourages a lean culture within the business. So Judy, if you can just pop the slide up there on the transformation and authentic leadership, would be great. And if you're just going to open a poll there as well. And in this poll, what we've included is some items from a psychometric test which assesses authentic and transformational leadership. So just as we're going through the next couple of slides, you can fill that in. So what is a transformational leader and what is an authentic leader in terms of an organization? So a transformational leader sets out to build trust within their industry. So they build that by trying to influencing people and acting with integrity towards their followers. They understand the individuals and they consider them from an individual needs perspective, and that leads through a coaching relationship. So the leader is a coach as part of that. They set out to stimulate people and to stimulate them from an intellectual perspective, which encourages innovation and it encourages thought within their followers. But they're not afraid to manage when it's necessary to manage. Okay, so that transformational leader steps in, recognizes when clear instruction is needed, and is not afraid to do that at the expense of appearing as a leader. The authentic leader is an extension of that transformational piece. And that authentic leader is primarily first, they're self-aware, they're transparent in their exchanges. They are transparent in stage, they're clear in their ethics and their morality, so they make it very clear what they stand for. They are, just pop the rest of it up here. They're balanced in their approach to everyone, and they're adaptable in what they do. So I'll just go into them in a little bit more detail, into each one of them a little more detail. So that self-aware leader is aware of their own strengths and their weaknesses and their limitations, and they're aware of how they're viewed by others. And that self-awareness is used in their interactions, in developing themselves, but also in their interactions with other and the environment in which they work. In terms of being transparent and using transparency in their exchanges, it kind of measures how a leader presents him or herself to others. And a leader with transparency usually shows a great deal of openness and is open to presenting their real self to others, sharing their true thoughts, sharing their true feelings, and in doing so aiming to promote that an authentic or a real relationship with their team, with their followers, with their organization. And it's kind of the opposite of that selective self-disclosure. It's about really developing, like we saw on the transformational leader side, it's about developing trust within that team as well. In terms of being ethical and clear in their ethical and moral standards, this behavior is a form of regulation or self-regulation that's guided by their own internal moral standards and their values. So they're clear in presenting them. They let people know what they stand for, what they don't stand for, and hopefully that's aligned with the organizational vision as well. And that ethical and moral behavior and stance is evident and evidenced in their decision making, and they're consistent in that approach with how they make those decisions. In terms of being balanced in their processing, the authentic leader objectively analyzes all the data in front of them before coming to a decision. They have a good sense of balance and fairness as well, and they also look to kind of reach out to other people within the team and within the organization to get views that, you know, whether they agree with them, but also to seek out dissenting views and opposite positions as well. And that leader with balanced processing, you know, really considers all aspects of the argument from a 360 perspective before making a decision. And then finally, that adaptability, they're willing to take their own position and on an evidence base to pivot on that position for the betterment of the team, the organization, as well as themselves. So they're not rigid in what they do. They're willing to be open, but based on evidence as well. And this model of leadership brings us to this story of the Emperor's New Clothes, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with and have heard before. And the Emperor's New Clothes really gives an example of a leader that's created a culture where people have a fear of speaking up, and a culture where it really demonstrates how the leader's influences shapes that culture. And you're probably all familiar with this story of the emperor, where two swindlers arrive into the city, and they go to this emperor and they claim that they have the most magnificent clothes and the most magnificent cloth. But this cloth is only visible to people who are intelligent, and people who are stupid or competent won't be able to see it. So this feeds into the ego of the emperor, and as it feeds into the ego of the emperor, he goes along with the story of, yes, he can see it because he's clever and intelligent, and people who can't see it are stupid and incompetent. And everybody goes along with this because nobody wants to appear to be stupid or incompetent. Everybody wants to be aligned with what the emperor sees. And like many of us, when we go to work, we never want to seem inept or stupid on the day, so we tend to go along with decisions. And it's only in this story when a child at the end sees the emperor walking down the street with no clothes on at all, and blurts that out, that the emperor has nothing on, that everybody realizes that they were caught up in this lie and in this apparent illusion of not wanting to look stupid, seem incompetent, be negative, or be disruptive. And the leader's role here is in shaping that culture, and it feeds into a construct called psychological safety, which was absent in this story, which Judy's going to talk about next.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that story does really just illustrate that. You know, it's very normal and natural for us to not want to appear stupid or be kind of excluded from a group. But yeah, so it is one of the really key components of a high-performing team, is this concept of psychological safety. So a lot of research has demonstrated that, Google's Project Aristotle being amongst some of the research that shows that this is one of the biggest differentiators for being a successful team. So psychological safety, it is a climate in which people feel comfortable expressing and being themselves. I'm going to just pop open a poll, and you can just fill that in as I'm talking. Just answer them in relation to how you perceive, the climate in your current team. This is anonymous, so I won't know who said what. If you work alone at the moment, maybe you could answer in relation to how you felt the last time you worked on a team. And so I have those 5 questions up there. So as I said, psychological safety, it's that climate where you feel comfortable expressing and being yourself. When psychological safety exists in a team, people feel included. Where there's diversity, that's celebrated and recognized. Team members feel able to have open conversations with each other. There's a willingness to help others in the team and to contribute, rather than just an attitude of kind of being in it for oneself. So in a psychologically safe team, there's also a constructive attitude towards risk and failure. When something goes wrong, like say a setback or some problem, people focus on, okay, how do we solve this problem and what did we learn from this setback, as opposed to looking for who's to blame. This means that there is a bit of a willingness to take smart, calculated risks. For example, speaking up with a problem, that's kind of an interpersonal risk. So when we have this climate of psych safety, you're not worried about being ridiculed or blamed unfairly. So as I said, it is quite common, unfortunately, that it is missing or lacking. It does need to really be intentionally developed. When there's a lack of psychological safety, we would often see, a blame culture, or maybe mistakes or bad news being hidden. One really common way, I would hear a lot of managers saying, I would tell my people to only come to me, don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. And I think that's really common and really normal and natural. You want to encourage people to be kind of self-sufficient. You want them to be problem solvers. But it could potentially be hindering psychological safety, then that could be the downside, because if people feel, well, I don't have a solution yet, okay, well then I better hide the problem. I better not tell my manager the bad news. So that's one thing that I would see quite a lot. When it comes to why this is valuable, it increases that knowledge sharing, it reduces workarounds, because as we said, if problems or mistakes are being hidden, then they're not getting addressed, they're not being learned from, so we might have to do workarounds or be making the same mistakes over and over again. And it's also really beneficial for innovation and creativity. If people feel more comfortable taking those risks, calculated risks, they can try new things, they can see what works and see what doesn't and experiment, which is really valuable because, in any workplace, we need to stay current, we need to adapt to what's going on around us. And if we don't, then our competitors will. So as well as all those benefits, people feel generally more included and valued and empowered to do their best work. So psychologically safe teams are usually more engaged teams. So this ties in with the next topic of employee engagement. And when people are engaged, they feel that their job is rewarding, that it's worth doing, that they enjoy it, they look forward to it. You can often kind of assess it based on how you feel on a Sunday night going into Monday morning. That can often be an indicator of how engaged you are with your work. I'm just going to close that psychological safety poll, and we're going to put up a couple of questions in relation to employee engagement. So I'll open those up and we'll be coming back to the answers later. But if you just pop in, how do you feel about your work? And as I said, it's all anonymous. So that poll, you can just work away on that. So when it comes to engagement, we're thinking of vigor, dedication, absorption, and discretionary effort. So having that vigor, that desire to put in your best work. So obviously that's going to make the job more enjoyable for the individual. They'll get more from the job. But then what about on the side of, say, the employer, from the organization's perspective? Engaged employees, they're often putting in that extra bit of effort. They take pride in their work. So the quality and the productivity of engaged employees is usually higher. They also tend to be more resilient. When you have engaged employees, they can generally handle stress and challenges a bit better. So that means that, there might be less absenteeism, due to illness, due to stress. And it can also be beneficial when it comes to, say, managing organizational change, bringing in, new ideas. Again, it can help people to be more bought in and realize that, okay, it might be going through a difficult period, but I have the confidence in my employer that will get out the other side. So this is a really, really important one, especially at the moment when there has been such change in the job market. A lot of people choosing to change careers, and a lot of people reassessing what a job gives them. So in order to consider this, it should be measured, conducting surveys, conducting interviews, really trying to listen with an open mind to what people are saying. I have a couple of those questions up in the slide, or in the poll, as an example of some questions that you might ask people to assess their engagement.
What's really interesting here with employee engagement, it's often mooted as something for employers, but it's something that's of benefit. It's a win-win. It's beneficial to anyone who's part of a team who feels engaged in the work that they do. They're passionate about it, they enjoy it, they work at it, they're in that concept of flow that we like to talk about all the time, because they like the work that they do. But it also has the win for the organization as well in terms of productivity. So it's something getting right is important, not just for us as leaders or business owners, but for our team. It makes work enjoyable. And Jude, I think, did you say this already? I think you might have mentioned it. It improves, engaged employees tend to stay longer, and it improves that kind of retention, which is a challenge so many of us are facing at the moment. And that other concept of discretionary effort, that's mentioned there. That's the difference between what people can do and what they do, which I love saying do, but it's the difference between what people can do in their day-to-day and what they actually do. So what they do in their day-to-day, and it's given freely. It's people do it because they want to do it, and they work harder because they're passionate and they enjoy the work, and creating that environment where employees feel engaged. I think it sits with the leader. Judy, would you agree? Initially,
I think, yeah, the leader has a huge impact on, how engaged you're going to be. Like, that old saying of people don't leave jobs, they leave their managers, or they leave the team. It's the people around them is going to have a huge impact. I wouldn't say solely the leader, but I think as well as, it's the people around them, the team as well. As well as then, of course, the wider organization, feeling that the work that you're doing is contributing to the organization, and feeling that, that it matters, that the company would kind of have your back, I suppose, as well, would tie into it.
Yeah, and as we get, I'm probably jumping ahead here, but it's also the leader and how the leader shapes that team or supports that team to shape, and then the individual within it as well. So it's win-win. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
So that brings us on to the organizational behavior. So we've talked about how the leader behaves, how the team behaves, which is a micro component of the organization, or a mini version of the organizational culture. How we can talk about that from behavior and in terms of measurement of that, and now into the organization. And the organization's behavior sits here. We won't get into huge detail now in terms of the mission, the vision, and the values of the organization. Like, are they clear? Are we, as an organization, have we got them up on the wall? Are we communicating them out to our team? Are we living them? So it's not enough to get it. It's great, first step, get them up on the wall, but when we designed them and when we came up with them, did we involve everybody as part of the process? Does the way we behave align with what we say we will do in any given situation? Is the way we treat each other and we treat people in the business, is that aligned up? So if we talk about fairness and equality, is that what we're actually doing? So making sure that the mission, vision, and values are documented, they're clear, they're communicated, but that we actually adhere to them and we live them, and we make sure that when we make decisions within the organization, or we have practices or behaviors, that they align with that as well. So it's get them out there, share them, and live by them as well. And that's the mission, vision, and values. Again, that's usually a strategic piece as well. The next step in assessing or benchmarking the culture is this reflection piece. So we've gone through the measurement, and then we have the Hansei, which means to reflect or to understand what we've done. So what we can do in this case is, because we've measured them, and in many cases we've measured them with psychometrics, we could then use that psychometrics to interpret, what it means. So I think, are you going to share the results at this point, Julie?
Yeah, exactly. So the first one that we had was the authentic and transformational leadership. So I can just share those results now. You can see there, for the first question, I go beyond my self-interest for the good of the group. A majority there, so 36% said they somewhat agree, and 36% said they strongly agree. But there's still about 30% or so that would disagree with that statement. Then we have the second one. I talk about my most important values and beliefs. And again, it was similar, majority, about 43% said that they strongly agree with that. And then we have around the kind of 20% that were saying that they would disagree with it. I see differing perspectives when solving problems. This one was kind of, again, a majority would agree with it. We had 43% said they agree, and 36% said they strongly agree, and then 21% said that they strongly disagree. Then in terms of articulate a compelling vision for the future, we have, again, about the kind of 36% for each of the somewhat agree and strongly agree, so most people agreeing with that. And then I treat others as individuals rather than just members of a group. There is just kind of 14% of people said that they disagree with it, and the rest really either somewhat or strongly agreed with that one.
Okay, and one thing I would expect, so these particular questions are set up as what we call an individual reflection or self-reflection questions. And usually, I mean, we're no different on the call here than anyone else, but we tend to have a higher opinion of ourselves. And the real power of psychometrics comes in when we start to ask people within our team how they rate our leadership. So this particular setup of the questions that we provided you here was about reflecting on our own leadership behavior, and the same with our own engagement and our own team structures, where this really gets power in benchmarking and reflecting on the team culture is when we go out to the rest of the people within the organization and we ask them to rate their leader and rate their environment, and we really start to see some more honest and transparent results in that as well. The next reflection then, and just let me just check you have the right slide up there, Julie, just if you just progress on there now for a second. So as part of this initial psychometric test, when it's carried out, there is a self-reflection report which can be provided if you do the full assessment of that as well, which gives you a score and a benchmark against the norm group as well. But as I said, part of it, the real power is when we go out to our team and we look to seek their opinion on our leadership skills or leadership in the broader organization as well as part of the development map. On the next slide, then we have the team and the organizational reflection piece here. And again, those questions that Julie put up, and she's going to share the result there for the psychological safety. So the team reflection, psychological safety, again, I would expect that all of us here as leaders or as managers within our business, we would believe that there's a psychologically safe environment. But as we get into slightly larger organizations or slightly move further away from our teams, we will start to see some real answers being uncovered here, where people actually are more open and honest in this anonymous environment. Do you want to go through some of them, Julie?
Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose especially for the recording, for anyone who's isn't able to see it in front of you, the first question was: people at this organization are able to bring up problems and tough issues. Again, we had a majority of people saying that they would agree with that. What about 28% of people said that they would disagree, either somewhat or strongly. The second one was: I feel safe to take a risk in this organization. Again, majority of people saying that they agreed with that. The same 28% of people saying that they either somewhat or strongly disagree. So majority said they agree. The third one was: it is difficult to ask other members of this organization for help. So in this one, it's kind of reverse scored. If people disagree with that, then that's a positive sign in relation to psych safety. So in this, we had the majority of people disagreeing, saying, no, it isn't difficult to ask people, meaning that, yeah, I can ask others for help. The fourth one was: no one at this organization would deliberately act in a way that undermines my efforts. Nobody said that they strongly agree with that. About 36% said they somewhat disagree. And then, the rest would say that they either somewhat or strongly agree. And the fifth question was: working with members of this organization, my unique skills and talents are valued and utilized. So about 57% said they somewhat agree, 29% said that they strongly agree, and 14% said they somewhat disagree. So again, as we mentioned there, most people having that sense of at least, somewhat, if not strongly agreeing with that there is a degree of psychological safety in their team.
Okay, perfect. And then the next reflection piece then is on the engagement. So you can, the screenshots here, or the samples here on the screen are extractions from the reports that are generated from these psychometrics. We'll talk about them a little bit more later on. But the next one then is the employee engagement piece. Is it? Or did we include the employee engagement in that? You might want to pop the employee engagement scores up there, Julie. Actually, sorry, I've skipped over it. Apologies. So the employee engagement here, again, we can start to see that people find the work full of meaning and of purpose, that in most cases 57% said they strongly agreed with that, and 36% or 57% somewhat agreed and 36% strongly agreed. So almost everybody found the work engaging. When I'm working, they forget everything else around me. 64% somewhat agree, 14 strongly agree. A few people disagreed on that as well. When they get up in the morning, I feel like going to work. I didn't answer this because I felt I couldn't answer it honestly sometimes. But when I get up in the morning, I feel like going to work. 71% somewhat agreed, 21% strongly agreed. And then when asked about whether I'm proud of the work that I do, 57% somewhat agreed and 43% strongly agreed. So everybody agreed that they were proud of the work. Again, question 5 then was, at work I persevere even when things don't go so well around me. 50% somewhat agreed, 43% strongly agreed. So the majority, 93% of people there agreed with that statement as well. And again, I would expect, I would expect nothing less from us. And I think the majority of people here are in senior leadership positions or owner managers of organizations. We have no choice but to get to come in the morning, or to get on with things, even in the face of adversity. The level is of how engaged we are as well. In terms of the organizational purpose and a reflection of that is, how clear are the mission and the vision? So is it there? How is my team performing? What's the level of engagement? What's this say about the organization? But really, that we're communicating the values. We ask people, do they understand them? And we look at the behavior of the individuals there and how it's going. So how do we improve this? So how do we set about improving the organizational culture, making it more of a lean and an agile culture? And that's a lean and an agile culture that's open and willing to change, that believes there's always a way to innovate and to do things better, that's progressive in their outlook. And the way we've asked these questions here this morning as part of this session, has been very much around self-reflection. And as I said, I do believe we have a skewed group. Judy, you probably agree with me on that, because the people who are motivated to come on this call, motivated to learn more, are usually an aspect of a work group population that are engaged, that are in leadership positions, and we would expect to see the higher performing scores as such here. But that's not always the case. I mean, our organizations aren't full of the us's, they're full of the others in a lot of cases. And there's a direct correlation. Like if we looked at somebody who, was not engaged, was actively disengaged in the organization, who felt there wasn't a culture of psychological safety, we would also see that when they rated their leader, if they carried out a 360 assessment and rated their leader, that leader usually would be shown to have low levels of transformational leadership, low levels of authentic leadership, and usually be the type of directive or have those poor leadership skills. There is a proven, and we've done it ourselves, a proven correlation between the quality of the leadership, the levels of psychological safety, and the levels of employee engagement. They're there, they exist. And then if you carry that out to, how these organizations are successfully implementing change agendas or continuous improvement activities, whether that be Lean, Agile, Six Sigma, DBM, whatever that might be, it also correlates to that. So better leadership, better teams, higher engagement, better culture, strategic and vision, better outputs of any of the kind of work that we do, customer service and so on from there. And that's proven, it's evidenced, it's there. And that's what this benchmark sets out to do, is to look at these key factors across the organization, and then look at opportunities to improve, because that's what we're going to talk about now is the improvement activities. So this good culture is it can happen accidentally, and in many organizations they have an accidentally good culture because they have good people, but a great culture is intentional and it's by design. Okay, and that's really important, that we get underneath the way things work, we measure it, we reflect on the results of that, and we come up with ways to improve it. So how is my team performing? What's the level of engagement? What does it say about the business? And so on. Julie, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I was just going to pop up some of these, different ways that we can improve, certain actions we can take. So, we kind of have touched on these a lot, most of them, about developing leaders to be taking a more coaching approach sometimes, and for leaders to be coached as well. Building psychologically safe teams, again, doing that really intentionally. I've been talking a little bit about how to do that, creating those clear mission, vision, and values, having activities to specifically engage employees, finding out what they want, and aligning the mission, vision, values with people. I would say when it comes to, strategies in relation to improving culture, I would say to really clarify what great looks like, to try and sort of begin with the end in mind, and not assume that you're all on the same page, because then, we were talking about great leadership skills. If people are great leaders but they don't have a direction, we don't know where we're following them to, so don't assume that everyone's perception of what great looks like is the same. So yeah, I'd say to definitely really clarify the sort of end goal, or what great looks like. You mentioned there about the mission, vision, and values. Aligning that with people, I would say is that, try to make it tied to performance, because sometimes people talk about values and they're on the wall and you just have to think about those sometimes, if you ever think of them, that's handy. But I think it's about not making it something extra, like putting it onto an extra, at the end of someone's to-do list. Say for example, if you value great customer service, well, then think about, is everyone being measured on how they deliver customer service? Are there metrics that you can use? Is it part of the performance appraisal or that discussion around performance? Is there any kind of bonus or incentive offered for achieving targets around customer service? So it's linking the mission or the values with performance, so that it's not just something that's a nice to have. Just on the shaping psychologically safe teams, it's something that we'll actually be talking a bit more about next month. So on the 12th of October, we're going to be having a session specifically on psychological safety, because it's a really important topic. So we'll be going into that a little bit more detail, but say one potential thing you could do to try and shape psychological safety would be, if you have a meeting and you have an agenda, put time in the agenda specifically for disruption or disagreement. So that way people don't feel like they're wasting other people's times or being difficult. They know that it's their responsibility to, you've come up with an idea, okay, now we have to respectfully pick it apart and see why it might not work. Not because we're being overly negative, just because we need to really interrogate it and make sure it stands up to, the high quality that we're trying to provide. So specifically carving out time to, be difficult or disagree can help to build psychological safety. So those would be a couple of things I would recommend in terms of strategies. Stuart, do you have anything else that you might want to add?
Yeah, and just point as well, just to say to everyone on the call, to either pop some questions into the chat or come in. I'd be interested to kind of hear what people's approaches are here. I'd be interested to hear how comfortable people would be around measuring leadership and this type of cultural benchmark from a 360 perspective. Everybody likes to do the self-assessment because we've a higher opinion of ourselves, but how comfortable people would be in terms of going out to 360 and seeking that feedback about theirs and the organization's performance as well. So feel free to come in. I did hear a cough. Was that a sign that somebody wanted to come in? Was that yourself? Hiya, Robert, how are you?
Hey Stuart, how you doing? Thanks, Julie. Really good as ever. Well done to you both. Just thinking, I suppose it's kind of the old chicken and egg around kind of the lean implementation in an organization, and I'll go on the camera. And the tools and techniques and the culture, and people like, when you kind of go in and you see a place, the culture isn't good or whatever, like, what do you kind of suggest as good ways of starting out? Like, I often think, like, sometimes people, when we, undoubtedly, like, the people are just is critical in it, and all the behaviors and what sustain good lean as well. But I often think, like, sometimes tools and techniques then get kind of a bit poo-pooed, like, and but I think that some of these tools and techniques are what I call cultural enablers, that they suddenly create an atmosphere that, like, that suddenly you're talking to people and you're respecting people and you're listening to people, and suddenly it's a better place to work, and it can build on it, like, so just wondering that kind of, like, if you go in and you see, say, culture and behaviors in a great in a place, tools and techniques versus maybe looking a bit at creating the psychological safety or other things within a team and culture. Thanks,
so
lads.
yeah, thanks. Great question, Rob. So again, getting started is a challenge, and there is this whole otherism type of thing. So I think if you were to start with a lean or an agile transformation project in an organization, you very quickly start to see barriers to change. And as you talk, when you're at the Gemba, so you're at the coal face of the work, and you're trying to understand why people won't change or why they don't want to change, you quickly start to find out that there's perhaps a problem with the way they've been spoken to, or perhaps a problem with a challenge with the leadership and the way they've been led in the past. And so people are resistant to change because of the culture. So that becomes evidence when you're trying to implement lean and the tools and techniques. So that's the first place it starts to become clear. And then those kind of conversations start to spill up or come back to the leadership team who are trying to implement a continuous improvement culture. And you kind of say, well, look, here's the feedback we're getting on the ground. And they talked about an initiative that went in the past and failed, and people got blamed, and people don't want to be blamed again. And you start to have that, it starts to open up that conversation. So the lean tool starts to open up that conversation around, why change hasn't worked in the past, or why change hasn't stuck in the past. And that then is in a lot of cases is the first time these organizations have had that culture, had that cultural conversation. And for us as external people, we're starting to say, well, look, there is a problem with the others in the organization, but perhaps there's also a problem with the us in the organization. So I always think it's best to start with the leader. It's evidenced in the implementation of the change, but the easiest point to start is at the leadership part of the organization. And you're right, Robert, in your point there, that as you start to implement lean tools and agile tools and start to include people in that change process, there is that kind of coaching and collaborative approach, which is new in a lot of organizations. And that got the momentum where that is to go back to the leadership. So my approach and our approach and the approach of this tool is to start with the leadership team. You start with the leadership team, you start with them, making them aware of what authentic transformational leadership and servant leadership is. You make them aware of the impact that their behavior has on followers in terms of employee engagement and team learning and psychological safety and so on. And then you work with them, you introduce them to the models of, so we've talked about a little bit about transformational leadership. So you introduce them to the models of leadership, the different types of behavior, how it can be measured, how it can be assessed. and then how it can be modeled by them in terms of implementing it. And then once the leadership teams start to progress themselves and improve the quality of their leadership, it's then you start that trickle down effect with, you know, helping them to design better teams. I know Julie has some tools that she's going to pop up shortly, you know, how we can design better teams, better team culture, better ways of working as well. So where the lean goes, we aim to get to the Gemba, get to the people closest to the work. If there does appear to be cultural issues, and there always is, even if it's not an issue, it can always be improved. You then bring it back up and you start with that smaller cohort of leaders. You help them to develop, make them aware, show them the models, show them how they can learn, and then get them to implement it. And then you bring it back down to the people doing the work as well. Julie, have you anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree what you were saying there about, securing leader buy-in is going to be really, really important. And sometimes then people go, well, that poses a lot of challenges in itself. Like maybe people on the ground can see that this would be a great change, but the leadership team isn't on board or isn't willing. I'd say, I suppose, when it comes to that, it's about, I suppose, trying to kind of speak the language of the leadership team. Like, do they always make decisions based purely on kind of facts and data? In which case, arm yourself with facts and data. There is research out there that would say, okay, this is how these kinds of leadership behaviors relate to performance or relate to outcomes, so have the data there. Or if, maybe the CEO loves a good story and wants to be kind of compelled, you can tell those sort of vignettes or case studies of, this is what the best leaders are doing, this is what the best companies are doing. Wouldn't that be amazing if we could do that too? So I suppose it's speaking their language and asking them questions as well. If you're saying, oh, do you think you have a problem with this? They'll say, no, we don't have a problem with that. But if you say, is everything as high quality as you might like, 100% perfect? And they'll probably say, no, okay, maybe not. Okay, what would you change, or what could be different? So asking those open questions, get the leaders to tell you what the challenges they're facing in order to say, okay, well, here are some strategies or approaches, and asking them kind of what they're willing to do. And again, in terms of securing leader buy-in, I suppose it's sort of creating a sense of urgency, and also creating that sense of the risk or the problems that will arise if you don't tackle it. Because I think as humans, in terms of our psychology, we're more loss averse. We try to avoid loss rather than necessarily seek gains all the time. So it's making sure that they know that this, if you don't focus on it, okay, fine, but we're going to fall behind our competitors and we're not going to be as successful, so kind of communicating the risks involved as well.
A question in there from Anthony: is there any other way of recommend measuring culture, or is it just performance? I would think processes are measured by performance and by metrics and KPIs to a certain extent. I think this set of tools here in terms of measuring and monitoring leadership competencies with annual 360s perhaps is a way of measuring leadership performance as it's perceived in the eyes of the customer, which is all we're reading about, or the follower in this case. Regularly measuring employee engagement. I mean, that can be done on an annual basis, and likewise with psychological safety. Regularly measuring that and building it into the structures, which Julie's going to talk about next. So, I think culture can be measured in the same way as we do in terms of process performance or KPIs. We can have a snapshot. So that employee engagement, you can correlate that to a snapshot. So while there is a 17-item psychometric test, you can correlate that, and we have done in the past, to a 3-question scale like an NPS scale, how likely are you to stay, or how happy are you with this? You can correlate that at the initial, it's like a benchmark design, so that you can actually ask that question as a snapshot on a more regular basis as well. So you can go back on a more regular basis to do that as well, Anthony. So it is part of, it's not just process performance. You can measure culture on a regular basis, and it's back to designing the benchmark. So I mean, we've presented 3 ways of thinking it here. When we deliver this benchmark, it's about going into businesses, and you deliver as a suite of assessments, and then with a program to follow. But the key point here really is the starting point is, and I mean, I uncomfortably use this Americanization or this American phrase, but a better you, a better us. Okay, so a better leader. If you're a better leader, there'll be a better team. Okay, and that's really the way it's got to go. You always start with the leadership. Trying to fix the culture of an organization without trying to address the leadership drivers that are driving it is pointless, and so it always has to start with the top in terms of culture. Do you want to move on to those templates?
Yeah, just before we do, there was another question that Alberto sent to me, just saying, can you suggest any tools to measure employee engagement rather than regular chats or one-to-one? And I think you just touched on it there, the 17-item questionnaire.
Yeah, so that's something we can there's open source ones out there, of course, and we can provide one as well. We have one as part of this benchmark. I think the beauty of the benchmark, I think, that we're talking about today is it links your data points. So it'll take an individual, it'll get them to assess their leader as they perceive it. They will assess their leader, they will assess their own psychological safety, and they will assess their own engagement. So you can start to see a correlation in your organization, and particular leaders that need work, or particular teams that need support as well. So if you go do an organizational benchmark, you will have individual data points. You can actually get a picture or an analysis of where the culture is sitting within specific departments and with specific people, and who needs more work. But you do need a mature organization to do that, who are open to hearing this feedback about themselves and I suppose what their teams think of them.
Yeah, so as you mentioned there, Stuart, and thank you for that. But yeah, we were talking a bit about some of the potential tools or strategies that you can use. And one of them is this team culture canvas, which I believe we have shown before on previous sessions. But this can be done, with maybe a new team, or maybe a team that's new enough to hybrid, or maybe they just haven't clarified their sort of goals, their values, who's on the team really. So this can be used to do that. You can get people together physically, or you can do it together online, and just fill that in to just really consciously design what we want our culture to look like, so that it's easier to then live that every day. So we'll be sharing this with you, and if you have any questions on it, you can get in touch with us in terms of how you might use it. But yeah, we would use this with teams sometimes. Another canvas that we have is this ways of working document. So this is, say if you've ever been wondering, I wonder how my manager likes to be communicated with, or I've noticed my colleague is sending emails really late at night. I wonder, do they expect me to reply to that? This document can just be a way of kind of clarifying who you are, how you like to work, how you like to work with others and interact with others, your own preferences, your own ways that you like to work. So you can share that, those goals, those interests, things like that. Again, that will be made available to you in the email that we send out at the end. And then, just to kind of recap a little bit about what we touched on in terms of building psychological safety, it's those things like inviting people to participate, asking them, okay, you've been really quiet this meeting, do you have anything to add here? Express that you show that you appreciate their input, even if it's not the best news, but show that you appreciate that. Trying to destigmatize failure, that it doesn't mean that you're useless or inept if you speak up with a problem. Having those structures and processes to provide feedback. So we touched on how you might have the anonymous feedback channels as well as the regular one-to-ones, and sharing your expectations, being clear about those as well. So that's just a very high level of a couple of actions that you might take, but we will be talking a bit more detail about psychological safety next month. So Stuart will just pop the link to that into the chat. We'll be diving into this topic of psychological safety more. So it's really essential for any lean culture or any workplace really that wants to engage people, to innovate, to come up with new ideas, to make fewer avoidable mistakes. You know, it's something that's really worth looking into. So it'd be great if you could join us for that. We're just coming towards the end of the session, so we'll have time for questions. But I suppose before we even go into the questions, I might just pop this up on the screen as well, so that you know how to keep in touch with us. You can join our LinkedIn group, and we'll send out the recordings, everything like that. So yeah, I suppose we've answered a few questions, but does anyone have any further questions then in relation to maybe culture or anything we've discussed so far? I think it looks like so. If you do have any, pop them into the chat. We'll be hanging on for another couple of minutes in case, you know, something comes to you. But even if something, a question or comment comes to you a little bit later, feel free to get in touch with us. That's our contact details there. So I suppose we'll wrap up and say thank you so much for joining us. It was great to have some of those comments and questions coming in to discuss all of that. If you had any questions or comments on anything that we've discussed so far, feel free to get in touch. And I hope to see you at the next session, which will be on the 12th of October. So thanks everyone. Hopefully see you soon.